Our society says you should be over that. There's all these rules.
Oh, yeah.
3 months, and they should be 6 months, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
But making sure that you're honoring yourself, you're growing and you're honoring your best self so that you can move forward.
Yes.
Which may not match other people's time. It may not match society's time. Sometimes it not even match your time that you might just need more time. So it's really listening to yourself and giving yourself that moment. And it takes practice to do that.
Yes.
Some people might learn that early on, especially if they had good role models,
yes.
people around them who were able to do it. But I think most of us, it's something we really have to work at.
Yeah. Welcome to episode 22 of Love, Growth, and Narratives. I'm Freddy.
And I'm Tiffany.
In this episode, we talk about growth. And what's important, the topic that we're going to discuss has to do with dealing with trauma, dealing with tough situations. Do you process it? Do you not process it? Do you over-process it and get stuck in it? And so that's one of the things that we want to discuss. And reason being is I've had a difficult time with that in my life. And I think that we can really do better. So we're going to go ahead and get into the episode.
Let's get into it.
So the reason why I wanted to discuss this is because in my past, I've had difficulty processing trauma. And it may not even be correct to say difficulty processing because I didn't process it, and it wasn't an intentional thing. It wasn't like I was not trying to process it. I just didn't realize that I hadn't processed it. For instance, many years ago, I think I was still in my 20s then, a good friend of mine that I had grown up with died in a car accident, tragically. And not only did I know him, I knew his family. My family, when I was in middle school, we lived just a couple doors down from them. And so, my parents knew his parents and, my sister knew his sister, the whole 9 yards. And I remember when I heard about it, I had no emotion at all, just none. And then one day, about 2 weeks later, I was coming home from work and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I pulled in to my parking spot and I just broke out crying. I mean, like a baby, just uncontrollable tears.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the first or the last time that had happened. And I started realizing I had another friend of mine who died later into my 30s in a car accident. And I had something similar where it's like the tragedy happened, I felt nothing. And then sometime down the road, I get this rush of emotion, this rush of sadness and grief and everything. And I knew that there was something wrong with that. And so I would have these things where hard times would happen. So just outside of tragedies, hard times would happen and I didn't process them, and I know that there were times when just the sheer volume of that unprocessed emotion would come at me in inopportune times. And, now I'm, mad at somebody at the grocery store or something like that, just something simple. And I see that now that I've gotten better at it, I start to see that in people that I know, that things happen and they're just blank.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. Do you feel that that's related to how males are socialized?
Yes. I mean, for me, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen women that are like that, but it's for a different reason.
Mm-hmm.
With men and especially boys, it's about man up. It's about don't cry. It's like the story I told before about my father, it's like, man up, you 4 years old, you ain't no baby. And it's like, well, I'm not really a baby, but I'm closer to being a baby than I am to being a man.
Right.
And it's just that, you're not supposed to feel. You're supposed to tough it out. And the problem is that unprocessed emotions are going to come out sometimes. They're going to come out.
Right.
There's no way around it.
Right.
But if you imagine when they start to build up to this extreme level, when it does come out, there's an extreme product to that. And that's definitely not healthy. Have you seen any of that?
I have. I've seen a lot of it, actually. I think I do tend to see it. I think also people tend to say when a person isn't crying or losing it, they call that being strong.
Right.
Right. So that puts that out there, the idea that being strong is you're not overreacting or even reacting. I'm sure that's not the intent of the person, but they're like, oh, you're so strong, be strong. I think part of being strong is letting how you feel out. It takes strength to do that. Right.
Or actually being strong, and like what you're saying, processing that emotion and letting it all out puts you in a situation where you can actually be strong because you have processed it.
Right. Right. And is it a negative to not be strong in a moment of extreme grief? Like,
right.
You're supposed to be strong. Someone just passed away, or your heart was broken, or some huge disappointment. Why do you need to be strong in that moment? Why can't you just feel what you're feeling freely?
Right.
Allow yourself that space.
Yes.
I think the wording that we use actually makes a huge difference. When I think about myself, I'm an emotional person. So I overfeel, I think, everything. But how I handle it, those feelings haven't always been the best. So I do recognize it and acknowledge that I am going through something or that I just went through something. But I think the ways that I handled it haven't always been the best in the past. A lot of it would come through the overeating. Although I don't feel, even though I'm overweight still, I don't feel like I use that as a way as much as before, where it was just really like, let me go grab something to make me feel better. Like, that was like literally my mindset.
Yeah.
Diving into school or work, like there was a time period where I had 4 part-time jobs and went to school full-time. And that's really when I put on the weight, to be honest with you. I just wasn't handling things that were going on in life. That was my way of handling it, and they just stayed busy. So I feel like in different parts of my life, I reacted differently towards grief.
Did it have to do with the amount or the short amount of time between events where you feel like I don't have a chance to process this one because now this one is happening?
That did happen a lot. We moved a lot when I was younger. I had a great childhood in terms of my mom did lots of fun things with me, singing and painting and drawing and teaching me to read at a very young age, all of that great stuff. But we also had a lot of turmoil. There was a lot of moving. When I was 11, she married someone who was very verbally and physically abusive towards her, verbally towards me. And that lasted a couple of decades in terms of the level of abuse. And so the way I processed it was different in different stages of my life. I mean, when you're a kid, how do you process that stuff? You don't know what to do, right? So I'm fortunate that I didn't get into something that could have just changed my life for the worse. But I definitely didn't know exactly how to process. I wouldn't say I pushed it down. I didn't. There was a lot of anger there. And I think it came out with the way I was with my friends in elementary and middle school. Just, a lot of times you mimic what's happening at home with people. And I didn't realize that. I actually had a friend tell me that. And I remember that to this day. I think that's really powerful. And you and I were talking earlier about it really does take someone sometimes to point out things that going on because you don't realize your own patterns often. You're also viewing how people around you process things or don't process it. So you're picking that up as well. And it's just a lot, right? So if you read self-help books or you talk it out with your friends or you make sure you're exposed to people who talk about expressing and getting those things out and going through a process to deal with things, that helps you along the way. But that takes some work on your part, being open to do that. And it also takes having some of the right people in your life to give you those kind of conversations, to put that in your path. But I definitely know people who just won't talk about certain things.
Yes.
They just refuse to, or they deny that it happened. It's just painful to even bring it up, so they just don't talk about it. But you still see that pain manifest. It's not like it's not impacting. Right. It is, but they will not deal with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know quite a few people who are like that, actually.
Yeah. And I've seen people where they're known as the strong one. And, you know, with among their friends or co-workers or whatever, they're known as the strong person. And this is male and female.
Right.
This is
right.
You know, so what ends up happening in those circumstances, they feel as if when something happens, that the weight is on their shoulders to be strong for everyone else.
Right.
And I know people like that who are the strong person. And some of them, they realize that they're doing it because they have to, but some of them also have been doing it for so long that it happens. They just don't process. And the problem with that is, like we both said, it's gonna come out at some point.
Right.
You know,
I think also it's really important to deal with, and we're not just talking about death, but all different kinds of things that grieving is.
Yes.
Many different.
A bad breakup, it could be anything.
Right.
Yeah.
That we have to watch our triggers.
Yes.
You know, because I grew up, you know, with a lot of arguing and yelling, I am very triggered by that in my own life, or even at work, you know, with my students, like that there's constantly a problem every day.
Yeah.
It's just, it feels so heavy on me. And I'm like, why can't we just get along? Why can't we? I mean, I expect there to be problems, but to the point where that's standing out more than having a good time, you know? And it triggers me. It does. And so I've over the years been able to manage that so that I don't get so triggered when I'm trying to help other people, especially young people, solve their problems. But it's a lot. You know, I have to teach them how to process what's happening and how not to process everything. That's the other thing. Letting everything in, everything becomes your problem that you have to solve. That's a lesson in itself.
Yeah, and that's a powerful point, because the other side of what we've been talking about is the person who does process it, but then they're paralyzed by it. You know, they spend, you know, an inordinate amount of time in the woe is me.
Right.
And, you know, the proverbial pity party. You know, so the difficulty there is they're just in it and they're not looking for ways out.
Right.
They're just so devastated by what has happened that there's just not a point where they say, okay, this happened and now I have to figure out how to move on.
Right.
And that's tough. And I'm not trying to trivialize the pity party, because I can throw myself a pity party as good as anybody. And I don't invite anybody to my pity parties. but it's just, you know, I think it's healthy to do the woe is me and the why is this happening to me. I think that's totally healthy, totally natural. But at some point you've got to shift from that to, okay, this happened, now where do I go?
Right. And I think many people need to be taught that.
Yes.
They don't know where to go from.
Yes.
They don't know what to do, because in society, the big push is don't be negative, be positive, just think of the positive. And then you're at the other end of it where you're like, everything is great, when it really isn't. Inside you're making yourself sick.
Yes.
You know, ulcers, whatever the case may be, you know, and you're showing children to do that too. Just act like everything is great and everything is great. So then when stuff really hits the fan, you don't even know how to handle it because you haven't exercised that side. So for me, it's a very careful balance. You know, I don't want to be like, oh, everything is fine all the time.
Right.
but I also don't want to be like, oh, everything is down all the time.
Yeah.
Just finding what to give your energy to and what type of energy to give to it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you said, which is so crucial, and but it's also so tragic, is that we put that on our kids.
Yes.
So if we're the kind of person that doesn't process, we don't allow our kids to process either.
Right.
Or if we're the kind of person that's the woe is me type, we put that on our kids too. What do you mean you're going out to play? Shouldn't you be home crying? You just had this devastating thing happen.
Right.
What do you mean you want to go hang out with your friends?
Right.
So that's really the harmful piece, is that we take our inabilities, our emotional inabilities, and we put that on our children.
Right.
You know, and if you're a teacher, sometimes you put it on your students.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think for me, one of the biggest things is knowing that there's multiple solutions to something.
Yes.
Because I really end up, when a problem comes along, I feel like there's one way to fix this, and I got to find that one way, and it's got to be perfectly fixed the way I think it should be in my mind.
Yes.
Instead of realizing there's multiple ways to handle this situation. Some may feel better than others, but that it's not the end of the world. I guess basically at the end of the day that the lesson I want myself to learn is that there are many different ways to handle most things.
Yes.
And that alone should give a decent amount of peace.
Yes.
You know?
It should. And also to understand that you're not going to get it right every time. You're just not.
Right.
You know, one of the things that I learned from being in telecom as well as being in government is that oftentimes you have to make decisions based on imperfect and flawed information, but you got to jump out there and do something. And so what I started to do was apply that to my life. When tragedies happen, I'm going to get out there and start doing something. And if I see that that's not right, then you can make shifts here and there, you can pivot. But the hardest part sometimes is just getting up, getting out of the bed and starting to make that first move. Now, one thing I was telling you about a few years ago, I read this book. Well, not read, I heard this book on Audible. And I can't remember the name of the book. I wish I could remember the name of the author, but he had this 5-minute rule. And this is a guy who's been through some legitimate tragedies, just ridiculous tragedies. And he said, I give myself 5 minutes, set a timer, 5 minutes to boo-hoo and woe is me, and then it's time to get up. Now, I think that's a bit much, depending on the situation. Yeah, if you stub your toe, okay, I can give myself 5 minutes. But, you know, if a loved one dies, that's just not going to happen.
Right.
So, but what I do like about what he said was, at some point, putting a termination point to that woe is me and that and just going into, okay, now what do I do? This is where I am. What do I do? And I do believe that people have to find a way to do that. Now, can you do it in 5 minutes? I don't.
Probably not. Right.
Yeah.
Probably not. But genuinely doing that and not doing that because, you know, you think other people are tired of hearing it, or society says you should be over that. You know, there's all these rules.
Oh, yeah.
3 months, and it should be 6 months, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
But making sure that you're honoring yourself, you're growing and you're honoring your best self so that you can move forward.
Yes.
Which may not match other people's time. It may not match society's time. Sometimes it not even match your time that you might just need more time. So it's really listening to yourself and giving yourself that moment. And it takes practice to do that.
Yes.
You know, some people might learn that early on, especially if they had good role models, you know, people around them who were able to do it. But I think most of us, you know, it's something we really have to work at. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me, when I went through my first divorce, I learned from Robert Parnell, because he would come over and just make sure I was okay. And he would tell me, because he's known me forever, he'd say, this is what you're feeling at this moment, and this is how you're going to work your way out of it. And it was interesting because I didn't know how I was feeling. And so there again, when you see people who don't process these things, sometimes it's not because they don't want to. Sometimes it's totally an involuntary thing where tragedy happens and it just immediately goes to the back of your mind.
Right.
You don't even realize that it's happening, but taking the time to say, how am I feeling? And this has taken over a decade to just say, how am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And start to go through my feelings when I've had, blow ups or whatever. So, okay, well, let me sit down. Is it because of that very event, or is it, residue from something else?
Right.
And just taking the time. But that is, for someone who hasn't done it, it's extremely difficult. But what I can say is that the more you do it, the better you'll get at it.
Absolutely. Anything you practice just usually gets stronger.
Yes.
And I would just give myself that time. Like, I think earlier this year, going through everything, like with, seeing my mom go through what she was going through with the double bypass surgery, there were just times in my car, I would just be bawling my head off. I mean, like, boo-hoo crying. And it would go on 5-10 minutes. And then it actually helped me. I felt better to go through that process. I needed that moment to do that. I needed to let it out. And I wasn't even sure what I was letting out. It was pain.
Yeah.
Right. And so the tears and the crying and just even audibly sobbing.
Yes.
It just helped get that out of my body.
Yeah, it really does. I remember that when my aunt died a few years ago, and I got the call from my cousin that morning, and I had so many things I got to do, and I'm running around, and I said, you know what? I'm going to stop and think about this. She deserves my time to sit here and think about her. And as I was doing it, I was getting dressed and I'm getting in the car and I'm on the 101. And I actually had to pull over to the side of the road and just cry.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was so helpful to do that, to get that out, where I could see, okay, I'm giving my aunt what she deserves. She deserves to be mourned.
Right.
And so for me to not do that, I think is a little inconsiderate.
Right.
And so, but doing that, of course, interestingly, the police, they'll pull behind me. To say, oh, I'm okay. And I pull off. But, and, luckily, traffic on the 101 doesn't move. So you got plenty of time to just, just sit there and cry or do whatever, because you're not going anywhere.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's tough. But the more I've done it, the more I realize it makes me actually stronger, because I'm getting it out and I'm processing it.
Right.
And so you remember after that phone call with my doctor, when she said, yeah, you're going to have 2 more hip replacements.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting on the side of the bed and you were there with me and I just lost it. 2 more hip replacements.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking about when I'm going to get ready to run another marathon and all of this. And that was just devastating. But what I found was, once I got all of that out, I felt fine. Because I got to the realization, this is what it is.
Right.
And I felt like, because I had processed it, I had taken the time to do the boo-hoo and the woe is me and all of that.
Right.
I actually felt stronger because of that.
Right. And I think also what you're saying is making me come to the, bring up control. I think a lot of time we try to control either how we're feeling the situation so much. Once you release that control a little bit, it sometimes it works itself out. Like, allow yourself not to be so rigid in how you were supposed to feel or react. that really releases things. I think when I wanted my mom to move out of her apartment, move in with us or move into somewhere else, the tension in my body was just, and then I finally came to realization that this is her life too.
Yes.
Right. And while I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be there if I see something, a decision that's really out of pocket.
Yeah.
I need to let go.
Yes.
I need to let go and let life unfold.
Yes.
And when I did that, I think it helped her feel better. It helped me feel better. And just the situation, we were actually clearer because we weren't holding on so tight.
Yes.
So I think that's really important to do. And I think it's important everyone should have a therapist or
yes,
at some point
absolutely
to help you talk through things. Even though you may do that work with yourself or a friend, there's nothing like it when they ask the right questions, because a lot of times it's not even just about the problem itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said something earlier, it's about something previous that went on.
Yes.
And so when someone helps you make those connections,
mm-hmm.
it releases you.
It does. And I'm going to make a bold claim based on what we talked about. If men as a whole, if we got better at letting our emotions out, and I mean in childhood, allowing young boys to cry and feel what they're feeling and explore their own emotions, I'm going to make this bold claim that crime would go down.
Yeah. Well, I think so too.
I mean, I think way down. Not, crime, spousal abuse, a lot of those other things.
Violent crimes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Violent crimes. I think it would also go into the workplace
mm-hmm.
with those who are able to work with people better because they feel emotionally stable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a downside
right
to getting men,
mm-hmm.
and we could talk about Black men, but I'm talking about men as a whole.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We need to allow men to feel what they're feeling, and we need to do it as boys. It's hard to start when you're my age, but I unfortunately didn't have a choice. But what we have to start doing is with our kids,
mm-hmm.
When our 4-year-old son falls and he starts crying, we can't tell him you can't cry.
Yeah.
That you're not allowed to feel emotion.
Right.
Now we can tell him, hey, you're only crying because you saw me and now you want attention, because sometimes that happens.
Right.
But allowing them to go through these emotions, and not only that, but sitting there and talking to them about those emotions. I've found that talking to our 16-year-old son about my emotions when I've had things happen,
right,
where I sit and I say, Joseph, let me talk to you about what's going on with me and how I'm feeling about this. You'd be amazed at some of the wisdom that can come out of a kid.
Oh, yeah.
You'd just be absolutely amazed. So, but not only that, but by having that conversation with him, gives him license to express those emotions to me, right, and to his friends and to whoever and to his therapist, and to start getting better.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that at first with my older kids, and with Joseph when he was younger. I didn't do that. I did used to say, man up. I did that. I was that guy.
Yeah.
And I realized how wrong I was. And so now it's like, no, let's talk about it.
Right.
Let's process it, but let's not sit in it too long. At some point, you got to get up and get back moving.
Right. I agree. And I say for women as well, I think we definitely talk more especially with each other about these type of things, expressing our emotions. But there is also this idea that women are supposed to be happy and smiling and demure. And, the kids are watching, and it's just how men are, and just keep moving and the peace, and if you're not, you're angry. And if you're a Black woman, you're doubly angry. And so it's just, you have to let all that go.
Yes.
You have to, even though people are going to judge you.
Yes.
You have to be and actually you're going to motivate somebody else to open up. And there's people watching you and wanting to open up as well. And you never know who you'll encourage to do that.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful what we say around our kids, around our, around our young boys and things like that, because women can be guilty of that too.
Yes.
What they're expecting of them, or they let them be just babyish, right? And don't have them express their emotions, like you go, oh, it's okay, my little boy, and all this kind of stuff, instead of saying, well, what's really going on?
Yes.
Like, say what you're feeling. There's the other side of it. Maybe the dad is saying, man up, and we don't want to hear what's going on. The woman is saying, it's okay.
Right.
They're saying it's okay, but still not giving you that space to talk about your feelings. So we all have work to do. We all have a job to do to help each other process and be better listeners.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to give advice, even if it's unsolicited.
Right.
You never know. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything just to give somebody your thought process, a well thought out comment about what's going on, and you never know how that could help them. Yeah. So,
and if you're like me and you've lived a life of not processing, start trying to figure out how to do that.
Right.
And what I would say is, in terms of doing that, is that when tragedies happen, when difficult situations happen, reach out to the friends that you can trust and try to talk it through.
Right.
Now, what I'm going to tell you is that if you were as bad as me, it takes a while, because the first time I saw a therapist and she was asking me how I was feeling, I was like, I don't know.
Right.
And I wasn't trying to hold back. I really didn't, and so just understand that you're going to be very imperfect for a while, but you will get better. I guarantee you will get better. And especially if you have the right support group, the right friends and family, and a therapist who can help you go through those things, you can definitely get better.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a journey, right? Not a destination. And so I do think that as we age, I love when I see young people doing the work I'm doing now.
Yes.
I mean very young, right? Because I teach elementary, and sometimes I see kids like, you got it. You express yourself so well.
Yes.
Don't ever let anyone beat that out of you.
Yes.
And then you have other people, they're just holding it in. They may not say anything. They may wait till they get home, and I'm trying to all tell them, like, say how you're feeling. Like, you told me how you feel, but did you tell the person that you need to tell? And it does take practice. I mean,
it does.
Young, we learn not to express how we're feeling.
Immediately,
right? Right? You're just like, you're not even 10. You're not even double digits.
No. You could be 3-4 years old and holding stuff in.
Yeah. Or just crying.
Yeah.
Not even, and still not saying why you're crying.
Yes.
Crying. You know what I mean? And just that expression of exactly what's going on is very important.
It is.
And so we all can do that work and inspire others to do the same.
Yeah. And as we start to draw to a close, I really want to put that out there, that we have to be better at this, especially men, women as well, but because men are the ones that bring the most evil to this world. We really need to do the work, and we need to allow others and encourage others to do the work, and understanding when you first get into it, it's going to feel very uncomfortable, but it gets better over time.
Okay.
So before we end, Tiffany, do you want to handle a little business?
I do. I want to ask you out there to please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have additional subscribers since last week, so we appreciate you. We want to continue to do that. Our goal is to reach 100 by the end of this year, and we're about halfway away from that. So please like and share our content, especially on Spotify as well, and Apple Podcasts, everywhere that you listen and you view our podcast. Please just hit that like button, comment, and share it with others. We really appreciate your support. and we want to get this information and this thought process out to as many people as possible. So please, we appreciate you just taking that extra time to hit that button.
Thank you so much. And as we leave this Love, Growth, and Narratives, episode 22, Growth. I'm Freddy.
And I'm Tiffany.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. See you next week.